All in Sports Network. We love sports.
Happy Halloween!
It is All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson, that's Jake Jimerson, and this is our Halloween special. Ha ha ha! We release these episodes Monday through Friday, dropping at noon each and every single day, and we have an immediate reaction of your Texas Longhorns on Saturday, but they're on a bye week this week, so yeah, I'm gonna take this off. I'm done with this.
Please
So,
do. Please
yeah,
do.
yeah.
I'll turn off the monster voice as well.
This is All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. Now, we have a jam-packed episode for you today. It's going to be scary good. It is our Halloween episode. We're going to go through some updated Longhorn news. We're going to talk some Texas basketball with Tre Johnson and what he did in the scrimmage against Colorado, and then some Texas Longhorn players already getting recognized mid-season for some semi-finalist awards. And so we're going to talk about a little bit, maybe even a player who has gotten snubbed off of some recognition this year. And then we'll go through Saturday's slate of games, some big ones that we think are important that might have a lasting impact on the remainder of college football season. Regardless of if Texas is playing this week, there are still games that impact Texas' season, and we're going to go through all of that today. So, Jake, how is your Thursday, your Halloween? Any big plans, or have you already had your plans over the weekend before?
Yeah, we did our plans the weekend before. It's a little hard to want to go out and do much on a Thursday night when you got work the next day. So we went out to a big Halloween party on Saturday night and partook in some adult beverages throughout the evening, as you're aware from the text messages you got from me. And I
had to call you out to Kay. I was like, uh-oh, Jake's drunk texting me or whatever. And she was like, is he saying he loves you? I said, yeah. And she goes, you know what? You and him text each other when y'all are drunk, I love you. And I don't get one single text from you whenever you're out with your friends. I'm like, yeah, well, I kind of have known Jake for like 20 years. So, I mean.
Yeah, you also see her every day. So,
right.
But she's complaining about that. She gets to see you every day. So
yeah, right. And you don't. You get to see me through a webcam every single day. What'd y'all go as, Jake?
I went as a Sith Star Wars. That's why I have no mask on. It wasn't a mask. I had on a robe and lightsaber and all that. And Beth went as Miss Frizzle from what was it, Magic School Bus? Or
Magic School Bus, yeah.
She went as Miss Frizzle. She had a whole outfit and everything. We went to this thing downtown where they put it on, and a DJ has on a couple years ago, he had on a full Pennywise outfit the whole time, and they do a big costume contest, and it's open bar from 7 to 10 if you buy the VIP ticket, which we did. And they lost money on me. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that explains the text that I got later that evening. So, we're gonna do the big family thing. We've got all the girls with us tonight, and so we're gonna go out and do all the trick or treating stuff. We're actually gonna do traditional trick or treating, where there is a trunk or treat that we're gonna go to. But I told the girls, I said, look, it's a rite of passage to be a child and be scared to death to go knock on someone's door and ask them for candy. That's just part of growing up. You got to do it, you know? And so we're going to do that. And if anybody even hands out candy anymore, that will yet to be to be seen. So anyway,
we do in our neighborhood. We just don't get a ton of trick-or-treaters in our neighborhood, but I imagine in y'all's neighborhood, there'll be kids going. I'd be shocked if there wasn't.
Dude, we live, for those who don't know, I mean, obviously who wouldn't know this information, but we live like a block down from where one of our kiddos goes to school. There's an elementary school like a block down the road, and it's just every single house here has a family and has kiddos. So I would be shocked if this wasn't, a pretty busy neighborhood come Christmas or come Halloween time. This is the first year we've been in this neighborhood, so we don't really know 100% sure as to what it's going to go down as, but we'll see this year, and it should be a lot of fun. We're going a skeleton family, so everyone's skeletons. My the middle daughter, she wants to she chose a witch costume. We're all going to be skeletons. She wants to now be a skeleton, which she has, but Maybe she'll be a witch. I don't know. Who knows? As long as they have fun. I don't really care if we've got 4 witches and a skeleton or skeletons and a witch. I don't know. As long as the kiddos are having fun and they're eating candy and hyped up on Mountain Dew. So, all right, Jake, let's go ahead and get into some Longhorn news. There's a little inside look at what our lives look like, by the way. We're not just boring accountants that sit behind a desk all day. Jake is, but I'm not. Quick Longhorn update for everybody. Jake, what are your initial thoughts? Oh, what? You don't like that jab? What are your initial thoughts going into this Florida game? We haven't really talked much about it through the bye week. But what are some of your initial takeaways without doing too much studying, too much film watching, too much, Googles on this Florida team?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't dove in much to Florida. I have seen them play a couple times this year. Quite frankly, I think we needed the bye week just to kind of we've been hitting it so hard these last few weeks with important matchup after important matchup, as opposed to the first bye week. We're really just hungry for some real games. Now is a nice little time to sit back, relax a little bit. But from what I've seen from from Florida, I think they're probably a better team than what their record shows. DJ Lagway brings a lot of things that the Longhorns are going to have to prepare for. He can throw the ball deep accurately. He can throw it on the run accurately. He is a little bit turnover prone, but he also makes big plays. And they are going to be able to test this defense vertically about as good as anyone. But at the same time, I thought Georgia would do that. And this defense did not let up in that game pretty much anything vertically other than a trick play. And so I think it's another good test for the defense. I think Florida provides a lot of things on offense. And then for on the offensive side of the ball for Texas, I think it's part 2 of getting Quinn right. He looked a lot better in Vanderbilt, struggled a little bit in the second half. It's going to be part 2 of getting him going, trying to get that intermediate passing game. That's really obviously the run game. I'm looking for that every week, but just my first thought of what I'm going to look for in this game from the Texas offense, I want to see those 8 to 15 yard, 8 to 20 yard throws. I want to see more of them, and I want to see more of them completed in this game because that's normally Quinn's money area. We haven't seen that as much since he came back from injury.
I 100% agree with you. And the DJ Lagway thing for the Florida Gators, I think he's a better option than Mertz, to be 100% honest with you. When he went down, you and I both immediately looked at each other and said, yep, Lagway's going to be a bigger problem. We thought he was the better option going into the season, to be completely honest with you, and thought he would win the starting job despite the Mertz's injury. We thought DJ Lagway probably would have been the starter or named the starter regardless of the injury. Unfortunately, the starter went down, and now Lagway's the number one guy and is probably not going to relinquish that threshold, that starting role, even going into next season, I wouldn't think. So I do think he's boom or bust. He's either going to be a huge playmaker or he's going to be turnover prone and he's going to make some mistakes. He's a young player and it'll be in a hostile environment at Texas. So it'll be interesting. And I do think Florida's running game is a little bit underrated. Looking at some just initial stats, just first look, I haven't actually got to see how their run game operates. But just looking from the outside, looking in, they've got some guys that are explosive playmakers and can get a lot of yards in bunches. And so I'll be interested to see how the run defense for Texas responds to that, similar to the Vandy, threat and similar to the Georgia threat as well. So run defense is also going to have to remain stout and continue doing what they're doing. And like you said, Jake, I think my biggest thing aside from actual play on the field is just your discipline and your communication and penalties, making sure all those things that you work on during summer camp and spring training is all taken care of during this bye week, and you kind of have a refresher course on it all, and this team looks much sharper. I think that's really what I want to see. I want to see the offense look sharp and crisp and precise again.
And sharp doesn't even necessarily mean scoring a touchdown every drive. I don't think either of us expect perfection. It just means not shooting yourself in the foot. Sometimes the defense is going to win some reps, and that's okay. It happens. But you can't beat yourself. And that Vanderbilt game, Texas nearly beat themselves in that game, because if they lost that game, that would have been one of the biggest shining examples of how to beat yourself in a game. And you look at Florida; they are coming off a huge. Obviously, they're playing Georgia this weekend, and that's might not be very pretty. It's a rivalry game, so you never know. But their most recent game was beating Kentucky 48-20 in a game where they had about 500 yards of offense.
Right.
So they are not as bad as their 4-3 record, and honestly, 4-3 with the schedule they've had isn't that bad. So I think that's a game that I'm glad Texas has a bye before, because the coaches can really make sure that they have a focus on them and don't overlook them, especially with some of the games coming up on the schedule, and be focused on trying to look better than they have the last couple weeks.
Well, that and Jake, they play Georgia this weekend on Saturday. And so that should be a very good blueprint, if you will, of what Texas can emulate into their game plan as to what Georgia throws at them. What did work for Georgia? What didn't work for Georgia? What does Florida respond well to Georgia? I think Texas has a similar, we talked about it even Texas-Georgia week, a similar roster in terms of the talent, in terms of the skill, that you can really implement what Georgia does to Florida. As long as you execute that same way, you should have similar results, or it can at least, be close to.
Yeah. And it's really, I think the coaches can preach it as a get right game, even though you're coming off a win after a loss. Because I'm sure the team, I don't know, I haven't read too much about what the vibe is with the team after that Vanderbilt game, but I'm sure there's a little bit of frustration, because I think they wanted to show more, especially on the scoreboard, than they did against Vanderbilt. I think they wanted to win that game in a much more dominant fashion than what the scoreboard showed. The play on the field, it was fairly one-sided, I will say. It was not a 3-point game if you just watched the play on the field, but because of all those self-inflicted errors, it was a close game on the scoreboard. And I think they want to rectify that with a game that they should be able to put away by the fourth quarter at home.
Jake, some news surrounding the Texas Longhorns. Jahdea Barron named Jim Thorpe semi-finalist. Jahdea is now being recognized for a lot of the work that he's been putting in. And, I think he's proved a lot of Texas fans, maybe even wrong or exceeded expectations to a point. But this does go to one of the best defensive players in the country at the end of the year. And Caleb Downs for Ohio State, also named a semifinalist, and who was not on the semifinal list was Michael Taft. Michael Taft, if you look stat to stat compared to Caleb Downs, has almost exceeded Caleb Downs' stats in every single statistical category. Would you consider Michael Taft a snub for this award?
I would, based off his play. The problem is he doesn't have the name recognition. Sure. He's a player who was a walk-on, and so he's just not going to get that recognition. Unfortunately, that's how the college football game works. He doesn't have the stars behind his name coming out of high school. He's been a starter previously, and he was obviously a key contributor last year, but he wasn't near as good of a player last year as he's been this year. His game has gone to a whole nother level. Along with this whole secondary, you could make an argument Malik Muhammad should be on that list. If you look at it, Jahdea Barron and Malik Muhammad are both giving up. I think Jahdea Barron was at 0.2 yards per attempt on him. So when a passing attempt goes to where Jahdea Barron is defending the receiver, it was like 0.2 yards attempt, something ridiculous like that. And Malik Muhammad was almost dead even with him. They were both to the top, either 3 or 4 in the SEC as lockdown corners. And that what a jump that is from last year, where, it's the corners and the secondary that was struggling. And at this point, I think they're pretty proven. They've played 2 stout passing offenses, especially if you look at passing efficiency, Georgia and Vanderbilt, 2 of the top in the SEC. And actually, Florida will be the next best passing offense when it comes to the efficiency ratings that Texas will see the rest of the season. Obviously not A&M. They are a run-first team. And then Kentucky and Arkansas, they both look to run the ball more than do the pass it. So this will really be the last explosive passing threat that Texas sees this year.
And that's really exciting because, there were a lot of questions going into the season. I think those questions been answered for the most part. I mean, I don't see any lingering issues moving forward with this defense. They answered the call, in my opinion, especially with that big finishing drive to prevent Vanderbilt from tying the game or even taking the lead at the end of the game on that final drive. And so I thought, this was an excellent stretch of games to kind of prove where they are for Jahdea, for Malik, for those types of guys. And they answered the bell. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be very, very fun from here on out to just kind of go into every game knowing your defense has the edge over the offense, because in my opinion, it's the number one defense in the country.
Yeah, I agree. I was saying that before the Vanderbilt game, and the Vanderbilt game only reaffirmed that. To hold an offense like Vanderbilt to what was, I believe, 170 yards before that last drive that had no effect on the game. That was when they got the majority of their yardage, so they were still under 300 yards. That told me everything I needed to know about this defense, and to force them into 4 turnovers when that was a team who'd only turned it over twice the entire season. Heading into that game, they've answered the bell at every single call, starting with Georgia and then obviously into the Vanderbilt week.
All right, Jake, let's switch gears. Let's go into the basketball world. Tre Johnson had 31 points in the scrimmage win over Colorado, has also been named to the preseason Naismith Trophy watch list. There are 50 players on that list. It's not like they've narrowed it down to 10 or anything like that. However, impressive nonetheless that he is on the basketball equivalent of winning the Heisman.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be the best freshman at Texas since Kevin Durant. And they've had some good freshmen since then, but I think from a production standpoint, that's what he's going to be, because go on YouTube, pull up his high school tape, and you'll see why I'm saying this. He is a scorer that Texas has not had in a while. And I know they had Abe Miss last year, but this is a different level. This is a guy who's expecting to go into the draft after this year and be a stud in the NBA right away, similar to how Kevin Durant was. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Kevin Durant, but he has that type of vibe to him, and that type of, there's a reason he's a 5-star recruit, the number 1 recruit coming out of Texas, and was a huge get for Rodney Terry. And he's a big reason why I have incredibly high expectations for this basketball team this year. I think this team should be a lot better than last year's team, to be honest. And Tre Johnson is definitely a big part of that.
Yeah, and Jake, this isn't your leading scorer, your premier go-to scorer that is an Avery Bradley or I'm blanking on the name now. Miles Turner. Miles Turner and it's Serge Ibaka. You're not going to get, this is not your go-to number 1 scoring threat like that. This is a different kind of, this is an elevated, different level of scorer here. This is a prolific premier scorer who should be considered one of the best college basketball players in the country.
Yeah, and he can create his own offense, and that's what I'm excited about. Is he can make something out of nothing, and he's not selfish either. He can dish the ball out. I think he averaged close to 10 assists in high school his senior year, and if you're not excited yet about this Longhorn basketball team, we are close enough now with game 1 coming up just around the corner against Ohio State. You need to jump on board, because this team has a chance to do some special stuff in its first year in the SEC. And if Rodney Terry can figure out the rotations and they can avoid some injuries, mainly at the big man position, because they still don't have a ton of depth there, I don't see a reason why they couldn't be at least in the hunt to win an SEC title this year, because as much as a step up as it is in football and obviously as it is in baseball, I think basketball is the one sport where it gets a little bit or quite a bit easier than it is in the Big 12, especially some of those road trips. It's just not even close to the same level as having to go to Iowa State, then even go into a K-State, and then obviously, KU, Houston, Baylor. I mean, it is a loaded conference. Yeah.
So, all right, Jake, let's go ahead and get into Saturday's slate of games. Let's go ahead and just go in order in which they're being played out, which is going to be a big noon kickoff. The number 4 Ohio State Buckeyes, 3.5-point favorites at Penn State. This is not their whiteout game, by the way. But Ohio State at Penn State. This is one thing where people like to say that James Franklin has been an overrated coach. Well, he's never been rated above Ohio State, and he never beats Ohio State. This year, he is rated above Ohio State and Ryan Day. Not the favorites, however, but still rated above them. So can't really be calling the rated properly anymore. Now you actually have a legit reason to say he's overrated if they come out and lay an egg.
To a point. At the same time, Oklahoma State is favored. Or sorry, not Oklahoma State, Ohio State. I saw OSU and Big 12 brain came back.
Yep.
And
it happens.
but yeah, Ohio State is a 3.5 point favorite in this game. And I think it's kind of silly. People have said Penn State's been James Franklin's been an overrated coach at Penn State, because if you look at it, if it was a 12-team playoff, he'd been in the playoffs almost every single season. He beats every single team that's not Ohio State or Michigan, which at Penn State is the expectation. I would say, I mean, you're not shocked at that. They don't have the same athletes and players as Ohio State or Michigan. And obviously this year they're hoping to turn that around. And I mean, that game's to
win some of those games from time to time. I mean, I think that's where it comes from. But
to say he's overrated.
Right. And it doesn't seem like he ever wins those games. Like, come on, every now and then you should be able to have a home game win over an Ohio State or over a Michigan.
How was Penn State doing before he was there?
No, 100%. I agree with you.
I'm not trying to be a James Franklin defender. I just think the talk around him is almost propaganda level at times, just because that program has been incredibly consistent under him, and they haven't been able to get over the hump against top teams, but they don't have the same talent as those teams, and they beat just about everyone else. But this is a big game for him, you feel like, because this is a year where the offense is better than it's been. It's more explosive. Every time they've been doubted,
coordinators in place.
Yeah, they still have a good defense. Ohio State's good, but they're not as good as a lot of people thought they were going to be, or haven't looked that way. Obviously, Ohio State's probably going to come out a little extra motivated after the bad game last week, but you got them at home. This is a chance to basically lock yourself into the Big Ten title game, and lock yourself into the college football playoff. It's an incredible opportunity for Penn State. That said, I don't know if I'm going to pick them yet. I don't know how you're feeling on this game.
Jake, I'm going Ohio State. I think Ohio State wins out. And even if it's ugly, I'm not saying they win out and they just look dominant and they just look like a top 3 team, a top 5 team. And there's not a dominant team in college football this year, in my opinion. Even Oregon, you can point at Oregon, but if I'm going to say that Ohio State's not going to look completely dominant for the rest of their season, but still win out, that doesn't necessarily bode well in terms of Oregon beating them by 1 point at home earlier in the season. So I do think Ohio State wins this game. I just think it's the same old story that we've seen with Penn State. They've tended to struggle early in games, whether that be to USC or whoever. Should have probably maybe had 2 losses at this point in the season. I don't think that you're going to be able to start slow and then beat an Ohio State team, and I think that's what's going to happen.
I can't tell you how badly I want to pick Penn State to win this game, because I do not like Ohio State.
I'm rooting for Penn State. My rooting interest is different.
It's going to be a rocking environment there, but I just can't pick them. I just don't think they have the talent to beat Ohio State. They've looked too inconsistent this year, and I think Ohio State can. Here's my main reason I'm picking Ohio State to win and cover is I think Ohio State can play their B game and still win by a touchdown, even if Penn State plays a B+ A- game. And I think Ohio State wins 6 or 7 out of 10 against Penn State. And I just don't see this being one of those 2 or 3 wins that Penn State would get.
Yeah. All right, Jake. Sounds like we're both on the Ohio State train there. Oregon, number 1 team in the country, 14.5 point favorites at the Big House in Michigan. I think Oregon wins this game, and quite frankly, I think they cover.
I'm going to take Oregon. I'm going to take Michigan to cover. I do think the physicality and the defensive front for Michigan could give some issues to Oregon, but the biggest thing that's going to decide, I think I just don't think there's a way they lose this game unless they turn over the ball a bunch, which Dylan Gabriel's is in his 20th year. So that just doesn't happen. But it's all going to come down to, can Michigan do anything on offense? If they can do anything on offense, I think their defense is going to keep them in the game early. But then I think Oregon ends up winning. I think they end up winning by exactly 2 touchdowns. And with that 14.5-point spread, that means I think Michigan just barely covers.
Jake, I'm going to call this game 17-0. I think it's going to be, I think Michigan gets completely shut out. I think it's ugly, man. And Oregon's defense is legit. No, you can say, I know that's not the identity that you think of when you think Oregon Ducks. I think they're going to shut out Michigan. I don't think Michigan can even get past the 50 in this game. Florida versus Georgia. This is always a neutral site game in Jacksonville. The Florida Gators will take on the number 2 Georgia Bulldogs, 16.5-point favorites, Jake.
Yeah, the wannabe OU Texas game of the SEC.
Yeah, that's what they claim.
Yeah. You're trying to tell me this rivalry is close to the tickets are $55 to get into this game.
He went to the
tickets were $550 to get into the OU Texas game. So all you SEC fans can go somewhere else. I'm not going to say what I want to say. It's a little too vulgar. But
I think you were going to go South Park on them.
Yeah, you can kind of screw off with trying to say that this even touches OU Texas. I mean, 16.5 points is a lot of points in a rivalry game. But at the same time, it feels like Georgia's starting to get going. And when they get going, I don't see this game being close. A freshman quarterback going against a Kirby Smart offense. It's a rivalry game, so I'm sure Georgia's going to come out with plenty of intensity. And I think Florida might be able to keep it close for a little bit if Georgia's offense kind of struggles like we've seen. But at the same time, Florida's defense had a lot of issues stopping the run, stopping the pass, kind of stopping about everything. And I just don't see Georgia being able to play poorly enough that this game doesn't end up being a 17+ point game. So I'm going to take Georgia. I'm going to take them to cover. And I think they win probably something like 42-14, 42-17, something like that.
Yeah, I think like how you mentioned for Texas as a kind of a get right game. For Georgia, I think this is a perfect opportunity for their offense and Carson Beck to get back on track, considering the defense that they're playing against. I'm going to just copy your sentiments in this game. I think you just took the words right out of my mouth. I think Georgia wins. I think they cover. I think this is a good opportunity for them to kind of just really not even right the ship, because I think the Texas game kind of righted the ship for them, but I think they're going to even be on a straighter path to their end goal, which is the SEC title game at this moment in time and one of the higher seeds going into the playoffs. All right, Jake, probably the game of the week for at least Texas fans, Texas A&M fans. You got the number 10 team in the land, a 2.5-point favorite at South Carolina. It is no longer going to be Cocktober, Jake, and that might concern some people, but not I. I really like South Carolina. I think that they are an exciting team. I think their defensive line and their front seven matches up well against what Texas A&M likes to do, which is establish the ground game. If Marcel Reed is going to be the quarterback, I think they are going to be capable more so than LSU was to put pressure on him. And you're not going to be studying film for, one quarterback, and then you're going to get somebody else in the second half, which was to the fault of Brian Kelly and LSU. They should have definitely been preparing for a Marcel Reed sighting at some point in that game. So that's more so a coaching error. However, I think going into this game, knowing Marcel Reed is going to be Texas A&M's guy, I think you can now kind of prep, and you've got the perfect quarterback to prep your defense for that in practice. You've coming off of a bye week. You're fully prepared. You know exactly what A&M is going to throw at you. I like South Carolina in this game, and I've predicted South Carolina to beat Texas A&M weeks ago. I have no doubt in my mind anymore that I'm going to stay with that pick. If it happens, that is yet to be seen. However, I'm going to take South Carolina outright.
I really want to pick South Carolina in this game because I think they have a pretty decent matchup because, like you said, this isn't Brian Kelly where his game plan was as fake as his Southern accent. And I think they're going to give A&M's offensive line a lot of issues. And like you said, Marcel Reed, he's electric in the run game, and they passed the ball twice in that second half, and that. You can't be one dimensional. And A&M does have a QB issue here because you're going to lose one to the portal more than likely after this season. And at some point you feel like they have to choose one. I don't feel like the 2 quarterback system is going to work its way out the rest of the season for them. And in my gut, I feel like South Carolina is going to win. So I'm going to pick A&M to win because I have just gotten in my mind in a pretzel and picking A&M games this year, especially against the spread where I've just done horribly. So I'm going to pick A&M to win, but I think this is a close game. I think it's low scoring. I think it's ugly, and I think turnovers are probably going to decide it. And if South Carolina loses this game, especially close, it's going to be forever the what-if season for their fan base with a 3-point loss to LSU where the refs essentially stole the game away from you. You laid a stinker against Ole Miss. That's the only loss you can look at and be like, they just lost. But then they lost to Alabama in a game that they seemingly had won. So those are their 3 losses. That puts them at 4-3 and 12th in the SEC. That's about as close as margins can get.
What do you think about the spread? What do you think about Texas A&M coming in with a 2.5-point favorite as the number 10 team? Seemingly a lot of people's kind of sexy pick as a dark horse going into the playoffs. A lot of people thinking that A&M is riding the hot hand right now and only going in with a 2.5-point favorite.
I think it's a healthy respect of South Carolina, and they deserve it. I think I would not feel super confident that Texas is just going to go to South Carolina and take care of them easily. I would be worried about that game. So I think highly of South Carolina, but I also think there's a little bit of belief that A&M, they're good this year. They're a good football team. They're a program that seems to have finally found the right head coach for them and has them trending in a good direction, and has the culture changed there a little bit. At the same time, the one game you can look at this year and the only game you can talk about them looking so great in is Missouri, because every other game has been closer than they would have thought. Mississippi State, they won by 10. That was an ugly game. If Mississippi State's defenders could just catch an interception thrown straight to them, they probably win that game. LSU, that was an incredible second half. They also caught them off guard somehow because LSU wasn't prepared, like you said, for a running quarterback. And then they barely beat Arkansas. They struggled with Bowling Green at home. They did dominate Florida when Florida was still in their two quarterback system and probably playing their worst football of the year. So I think there's a healthy respect for South Carolina, but also not trusting that A&M is necessarily actually a top 10 team.
All right, Jake, let's move on. Louisville at number 11, Clemson, 10.5-point favorites. Does Louisville even stand a chance in this one?
This is my upset special. This is my
you broke out the soundboard twice in this episode.
Yeah. Gotta put it to a little use. I don't want to overuse it. Don't want to worry. I'm not just gonna reggae horn it over and over and over. but gotta use it every now and then to have a little fun with it. But the buttons are fun to press and they're shiny. Sorry. But I think Louisville is a team that was expected to be good going into the year. They lost some close games, so everyone's like, they're not that good of a team, but they've been close in those games they've lost. They nearly took down Miami, kind of like everyone else last week. And I think they get it done this week. Clemson, yes, they've been rolling since that Georgia game. They have also not played anyone with a pulse. This is the first team they've played where the doctor has not declared them dead. So I think Louisville comes out. I think they win a really close game, even though it's at Death Valley, and they get their first big win, and that will be the big shakeup of the weekend.
I like it, Jake. I like it. I didn't give a prediction. I'll go ahead. Since that's your upset special, I'll take Clemson to win. I don't think they cover. I think Louisville makes it a close game and another heartbreak defeat at Clemson. It's a very difficult place to win. Number 18, Pitt. This is a huge game for the ACC, Jake. Undefeated Pitt undefeated Pitt in general in conference play, and then the 7-1 SMU, undefeated in conference play. SMU Mustangs, 7.5-point favorites over Pitt. Pitt coming off of a just absolute smacking of Syracuse last week. How do you feel about this Pitt SMU game? Me personally, Jake, I think SMU wins this game. I don't know if they cover. I think it's going to be maybe a 1-point game, final second field goal, maybe even an overtime victory for SMU. I think Pitt's going to give them everything they've got. But I do think SMU comes out on top at the very end of this thing.
Yeah, I would have picked SMU by several possessions probably just a week ago. Pitt did play their best game of the season, blowing out a pretty decent, not a terrible Syracuse team, especially a team that doesn't get blown out like that. But I've doubted SMU over and over this year. And so I'm going to go ahead and give them the kiss of death by jumping on the train and jumping on the Pony Express. And I think they win this game and they cover.
So, Jake, another thing that and I just kind of blowing through this just because we're running a little over time, but I wanted to mention to you and how you felt about this, because I think this is absolutely absurd. I think it's disrespectful, and I can't believe it. Auburn is home favorites over the Vanderbilt Commodores by a touchdown. They're 7-point favorites over Vandy. Auburn, 7-point favorites. I thought that was crazy. I'm taking the money line on Vandy to just win outright anyway in this game, but I thought Vegas did an absolutely just disrespectful job to the Commodores.
Yeah, I think it's because Auburn is a team that when they lose, you're always looking at it like they beat themselves, but they've shown to do that time and time again, while Vanderbilt shows to be a team that finds ways to win football games, finds ways to make football games close. Now I will say the biggest concern of this game, it's at Auburn. Auburn's a tough place to play. Vanderbilt has not looked good on the road this year. No. That's all their losses, including to Georgia State. So I really want to pick Vanderbilt to win. I don't think Auburn's going to cover. I do think Auburn wins this game. It feels like Auburn's due for a win where they just don't completely beat themselves. I think Vandy's defense isn't going to force the turnovers, quite frankly. They were lucky to get the 2 they got against Texas. And so for that reason, I think Auburn wins, but I'm definitely going to bet Vandy to cover that spread. It's a little too disrespectful in my opinion.
All right, Jake, blow the horn. My upset special of the week, it was not on the slate of games that we announced. However, I am taking the Duke Blue Devils, led by former Texas Longhorn quarterback Malik Murphy, to upset the number 5 Miami Hurricanes on the road. 20-point dogs are the Duke Blue Devils, and I'm taking them to win outright to beat the Miami Hurricanes. I think this is the week it finally happens. Miami has absolutely just skated by on thin ice each and every single week. The luck's got to run out eventually. If it doesn't happen this week, you might as well just write them in permanent ink into the ACC championship game. But I do think this is the week that Malik Murphy tries to play spoiler and gets the win for Duke over Miami. I just wanted to throw that in there real quick.
Yeah, I'll tell you now, I'm picking Miami to win that game, but 20-point spread for Miami against anyone is crazy. They're going to win by 3 points. Duke's going to score a touchdown to win right at the end. The refs are going to throw a flag and say that it was an illegal forward pass, and it won't even be true, obviously. Yeah. And then Miami wins, and the refs don't get investigated.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly how it's probably going to play out, Jake. You are exactly right. Well, Jake, that is going to do it for our show today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Tomorrow's episode, we have a great guest for you. We have Mike Harge with 1300 The Zone in Austin, the iHeartRadio ESPN affiliate, and he's going to jump on and talk all things Texas Longhorns with us. He's also going to tell us some really fun stories about his playing days in the majors, and then also some cool stories about his co-host. If you don't know about him, look him up. And we are going to have a very, very fun interview with him. So stay tuned. Put your alerts on. Like, share, subscribe. You're not going to want to miss it. This is All In Horn, your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on YouTube and where all podcasts can be listened to. Brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. He's Jake Jimerson. And as always, welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.